We are in Tzidkas Hatzadik, Os Chavtes. I want to give the following introduction that I had to read this like 10 times until I think I may understand it. But now that I think I understand it, I actually think it's one of the most profound teachings that of Rabbi Tzaddik, and maybe I'm adding something here. But let's just start with the Gemara again. Now, we've been going over this Gemara for weeks, and the Gemara says very simply, and I just want to point something out before we begin here, Tanya, that there's a Brisa. Keep track of this. Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer, Tana, Omer, Sholosh Mishmars Havi Alayla, that the night is divided into three. Val Kol Mishmar u'Mishmar Yoshev HaKadosh Baruch Hu V'Shoei Ka'ari. Don't know if we kind of noticed it before. That we're talking about the reason this is brought into the Gemara Brachos is we're trying to work out what's the Zman Kriya Shema. And we spoke a lot about what happens at the changing of the guards in Shemayim, the Chamor Noyer, the Klavim Tzayakim, Tinok Yonek, Mishadei Imai, right? Those are the three simonim that we have in this world over the Mishmaris Balayla. What we didn't spend time on, I don't recall, is that's not what's happening in Shemayim. In Shemayim, it's not that there's a Chamor Noyer or Klavim Tzayakim. Obviously, there's no babies that are waking up in the Shemayim. What is happening in the Shemayim, Sholosh Mishmars Havi Alayla, this is what the Brisa says, Val Kol Mishmar u'Mishmar Yoshev HaKadosh Baruch Hu V'Shoei Ka'ari. All three times, same thing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is roaring like a lion. At midnight, at Netzachama, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is roaring like a lion. We have three different reactions in this world. One reaction of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in his world, and that in the Rakia, and that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shoyei Ka'ari Shenemar, and Rabbi Eliezer the Tana brings a pasuk, Hashem mimarim yishag u'mimayin kodsha yitain koilai sha'ai yishag al navehu. That is, you see the word sha'aga, roaring, comes up three different times in this one pasuk in Yirmiyahu. L'lamdeinu, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu roars not once and not twice, but three times. And when does he do this? At the changing of the Mishmaris. So what's going on here is what we've been talking about, and donkeys braying and things like that. But what's going on in Shemayim is just one thing every few hours. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is roaring. And what is this? And we have a siman of what these roarings are, and that's everything we've been talking about. Ad kan the Brisa. If you turn a page, at the end of this Gemara, the Gemara quotes, Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel, Amar Rav. That's, by the way, interesting because Rav and Shmuel, Rav Yitzchak bar Shmuel, said in the name of Rav. So Rav Yitzchak said in the name of Rav. So it's kilu like a Rav or Shmuel. This is Hamoraim, much later than the Brisa that we quoted. Amar Rav, Sholosh Mishmarais Havi Alayla. Same thing. Val Kol Mishmar u'Mishmar Yoshev HaKadosh Baruch Hu V'Shoei Ka'ari. Same thing. V'Omer, and here's what Rav and Rav Yitzchak are most say. V'Omer, what does Hashem say when he's roaring? What is that roaring all about? So says the Gemara, this is not in the Brisa. Oi, now there's two girsas in the Gemara. Oi labonim shabavo neseim hechravti especies. Probably the way you remember the Gemara, right? Woe unto my children, that in their sins that I have destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, sarafti es heichali, I have burnt the heichal, the iglesias banai lebein ohav dekechavim, and I caused the Geulah to happen. The reason I point out the two girsas is that what I just read is not the correct girsa. The correct girsa, this I know from Svarim, not from me. The correct girsa, the original girsa of this Gemara goes like this. Hashem says, Oi li, woe unto me, she'achrafti es beisi, v'sarafti es heichali, v'iglesias banai lebein homus oilam. The church, the censors, Chapter here, they wanted to change it, that the reason why the Jews are in Geulah and having all the tzaros in the Churban Beis HaMikdash is because of their Averos, because they didn't accept Yeshu HaNotzri. So they changed it, and if you look here in the Gemara, it's in brackets. The way I read it to you before is in brackets, and many people have done a lot of research into this, the censor, researchers. And what it should say, what it originally said is Va'oimar, and Hashem says, Oy li, she'achrafti basi, sarafti echali, v'iglesias bonai lebeino ovdei kachamim. Hashem is saying the pain is mine, and he doesn't blame it in the Gemaras, in the words of Rav, on the Jewish people, although we know, but just that's not what God said. You can't misquote God. And this was added in, Oila bonim, Shabava, these Jews, the bonim, Shabava Nisayim, Hachrafti Espesi, it's because of their Averis. I just want to, while we're here, and we'll go back to this, the next Gemara. So you see, we have two Gemaras here, which I think people, one is a Brisa, one is Rav Yitzchak and Rav, that say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is shoyeg 3 times, and each time he's talking about the Gullus, which we're going to go into. And then there's another Gemara, which we want to talk about, and that is Amar Rabbi Yossi. Now, Rabbi Yossi was, time is a Tanoim, he was a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva. So Amar Rabbi Yossi, he tells the story, famous story, Pam ha'achas ha'yisi mahalach baderach mechnachsti l'chor ba'achas mechor voice Yerushalayim lispalel, that once I was traveling and I went into a chorva in Yerushalayim. I must say, even though I want to say it later, according to the Chidushei HaGoinim, this chorva was the Harabayis. He went into the Harabayis to daven, Rabbi Yossi. And when he went into the Harabayis to daven, Bo Elio Zachor Latov, and he gave him Musar. V'shamar li ala Pesach. He waited there. Ad shesiyamti tfilasi. Rashi says to make sure I was safe. Elio Hanavi waited there to make sure I was safe. Then he said to me, what'd you go into the chorva for? Chorva. So he says, because he said his reason says Shemi Yafsikuni every derech. If I would be out of the chorva, so then I don't know that I would be able to daven b'kavana. Think Gullus. And Eliodavi told him that you're not supposed to daven in the chorva. Okay, sounds like the Briskerov. Eliodavi said you're not supposed to daven in the chorva. But then Eliodavi says to him, Amarli, b'ni ma kol shamata b'chorvazu. Im kvar, what did you hear in this chorva? Again, it's not me, it's the Chidushei HaGoinim, the Yaacov, the Kosov, the brings on the side. The chorva was a chorva kodesh in Yerushalayim, and probably the Harabayis. There's what did you hear there? It's like, choshev thing, what did you hear? So what he said was, Amarti lo shamati baskol. Now, there's a big difference between a baskol and the Shem Hashem. You don't hear Hashem talking. What you hear is a baskol, an echo, a reverberation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's voice. So I heard a baskol, ve'oi meres, and the baskol said, Oi, 2 Girsas, Oi, la bonim shabav, and Isayim hechrafti as basi v'sarafti as sechali. Here once again the censor did its work and added in what's in here in brackets, la bonim. Or he said the same words that Rav and Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Shmuel said, Oy li shehechrafti es basi v'sarafti es sechali v'iglesias bonai lebeino ovdei kachamim. Same 3 things. So just to you're not holding in brachas daf gimel, but the Retzev Hadvarim, the sequence of the Gemara is that Rabbi Yossi heard in this chorva the same thing that Rav said to us, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's, that is his shagokari. So it comes out, what the Gemara doesn't say explicitly, but I'm saying Pashat of Pshat, is that what Rabbi Yossi heard in the chorva was the shaga of HaKadosh Baruch Hu at the Gimel Mishmaris. That's what he heard. But he heard it in the form of the voice of Hashem, or there is a voice of Hashem. Nobody hears that. We have our Simonim Lamata, but Rabbi Yossi in that Makam Kadosh already heard it as an echo. And Eliyahu Navi was taken with this echo. Eliyahu Navi responded. One more point. When he heard about the echo, Eliyahu Navi said, "B'ni, chayecha v'chaye roshcha." I swear to you, you didn't hear like some kind of unusual thing. This is something. So it's referring again back to this baskol, which is a reflection of the roar of Hashem. This happens 3 times a day already. The Gemara goes further, which if we have time we'll go into. Reb Tzaddik is concentrating now on this trifecta of a lashon. There seems to be 3 things that Hashem is saying and the Baskol is saying. 1, Hechrafti es beisi. Number 2, Sarafti es heichali. Number 3, Higlesi es banai lebeinu ma'asayim. So there wasn't just a bam charbon. There was a 3-step process to the charbon, and the 3 steps are charbon. Nichnas la'achas michurvais Yerushalayim. By the way, there's charbon, there's shreifas ha'heichel, charbon habayis, shreifas ha'heichel, galus habonim. 3 different steps to the galus, and Reb Tzaddik HaKohen wants to analyze. What are these 3 different steps? What does it even mean? Isn't it the same thing? Charbon habayis and shreifas ha'heichel. Sounds very similar, right? Charbon habayis, God forbid. Shreifas ha'heichel. How was he machrivet? By shreifas ha'heichel. Says the Tzidkas Hatzadik, and here if you have it, take a look, that there's a sequence here. I'll tell you even a chronological sequence. Mitchila, first thing that happens is Hu charbon habayis. First thing is the charbon habayis. In parentheses, which I believe means that Reb Tzaddik wrote this on his second time around in the book, writing the book. Charbon habayis, hapnimi, the innermost chamber. Beis dira, the place of dwelling. Uboy dai rak chorva shecharav me'ein darim. What happened? What was the first step of the Geulah? The first step of the Geulah is that Hashem left the house. A chorban, he teaches us, means not there's rubble, there's piles of rubble, or there's fire. That's not chorban. Chorban is that it becomes abandoned. The Beis HaMikdash became abandoned. It became abandoned by us, but also became abandoned by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by the Shechina. And that's called Charbon habayis. Chidush. Acher kach, stage 2. If you're analyzing the destruction, streifas ha'heichel. Then the fire starts, and the heichel gets burnt down. As Reb Tzaddik v'acher kach streifas ha'heichel hachitzayin. We're talking about now the more chitzonius part of it, the outermost part. V'chorbanoi means the building burnt down. Hainu sreifa. V'acher kach galus Yisrael. Well, look what happens. What happens is that here's the Beis HaMikdash, functioning, beautiful. Bayis Rishon, Bayis Shein, everything's what seems to be functioning perfectly. And then Hashem leaves. Hashem leaves. And the Shechina leaves. And now you have a bayis which has become a building. And it's like having, my understanding, a guf without a neshama. What happens when the neshama leaves the guf? You see people say, well, what happens, what's definition when the neshama, what's the definition of death when the neshama leaves the guf? Or when do you die with the neshama? It's not true. What happens is the neshama leaves the guf, and then you die. the body, the physical body, cannot sustain itself without an neshama. According to the Mekubalim, the neshama could leave hours earlier. It could be Yitzias Neshama, even though we call it Yitzias Neshama, than Misas Haguf. Misas Haguf, the body's still breathing. But the point is, even if it would be simultaneous, it doesn't make any difference for our purposes. It's two separate things. The neshama doesn't die. Neshama leaves this guf, and the Shechina leaves the Beis Hamikdash. And this is called Charbon. It's desolate. It's abandoned. It's empty. It's devoid of all kedusha. Then, Memela Sarafti Aseichali. Now the enemies can get in. Now the enemies have full entree into this building, whether it be Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuzradan, or whether it be Titus HaRasha. And they could come in and they could destroy it. And what do we say all through Kinos? Like, how could it be, Hashem, that this building could be destroyed? Hooray. We say this in Kinos. Hooray. Kohen Gadol walks in and he did one Aveira, and the Kohen Gadol dies, that the Beis HaMikdash can't fartrog even one Aveira. So how is this possible that Nebuchadnezzar could go in, or Titus? How could it be? What's the answer? This is a kina, but what's the answer to that question? The answer is that when it has the Kedushas HaShechina, this is the real answer and the Lomdish answer, that when it has the Kedushas HaShechina, so then even one Avera can't last in that Kodesh HaKadosh. But once you take the Kedushas HaShechina out, so now anything goes. It's just a building. Historical building. Maybe they tried to make it into a museum. You know, the Robids were big machlokes. The Robids, Josephus, you'll find big machlokes between the different Roman generals whether to actually burn down the Heichel or not. It was beautiful. Not only that, they built it. The Hordus built it. So, like, why should we knock down a beautiful building? Like, let's put some Avodah Zarah in there. But they were trying to quell the resistance of the Jews. They thought the best thing to do would be just to burn down the building to demoralize everybody. So they burnt down the building. But the point is this, Beruchnius, that there were two steps. One step was the Chorban, the Kodesh Baruch Hu walked out of this building. The second step was the enemies burnt, Sarafti Aseichali. The building was able to be more like the goof begins to decay. Decompose. And what's the third thing that happens? Well, what are we with Eretz Yisrael? We leave. Golos Habanim. This is like a three-step natural process that not Rabbi Eliezer, but Rav spoke out. These are the three steps. The Rabbi Tzaddik explains. Acher kach Golos Yisrael v'chein hachoite. Now, let's get personal. This is true of every person who doesn't have heirs. So here's the dimyon. Like, we're like a Beis HaMikdash in the sense that we're a goof with a neshama. Person does a chet, serious chet. When I say serious, I don't mean, not muksa, that's not what I mean. But when I say a serious chet, I mean, in other words, one really is parikol. One really, I'm just going to do avera, I don't care. So you do a chet, you defile the spirituality of your soul. You do this chet, what happens? The Shechina, or the Kedusha of the person, leaves this goof. You don't die. Although, as I'll say, like, maybe it would have been right to die at this point. But Hashem wants us to do tshuva. So, but all of a sudden, or maybe it's not so all of a sudden, maybe it takes a little bit of time, I don't know. But what happens is, hechrafti espesi. There's a chorban abayis. My goof becomes devoid, becomes abandoned of Kedusha, becomes empty. The lights go out. Vahi b'yom hashmini l'miluim, Rashi says that Moshe Rabbeinu built the Beis HaMikdash, didn't work, took it apart, built it, took it apart, built it. So, I mean, it's like when I'm building a IKEA cabinet. This is what does it mean? It works. What does it mean? It works. The Shechina. It means the Shechina. Once the Shechina went in, that the Shechina came into the Beis HaMikdash. So the same thing is with us, says Reb Tzadok, that a person is built very much in the same way as the Beis HaMikdash. This is, by the way, if you recall, the whole chapter in Nefesh HaChaim. A person is built very much the same way. It has to be that way because the idea is that Hashem made a world, he made Gashmias, and in that Gashmias he infused Ruchnias, a neshama. So whether the neshama of the world is the Beis HaMikdash and the neshama of a person is the neshama, but everything has it's Gashmias and then it's insertion of Ruchnias. That's the way things work. So what happens when a person is Chotei? Out goes the neshama, or it becomes Chorav. And here's a new meaning, what we learned today, new meaning of the word Chorav, empty, abandoned. Mitchila belev, the process, the negative process, the spiraling process begins in the lave. What happens in the lave? Charav miyira shamayim. Va'acher kach, watch the sequence here. Acher kach, after the lave gets affected, because I did a chet, b'moach, all of a sudden, my brain is not thinking correctly anymore. Shesham enoi madur kavua ki ba'isu isha shubelei. We'll explain in a minute. The what?
This before the chet or after the chet?
I do a chet. Once I do a chet, I was mekalkel, meaning my yir shemayim was mekulkel, or I was mekalkel my yir shemayim. So there's the lave stopped working. Think about it in the physical world. And once the lave stops working, my thinking becomes a mess. Metushtash. Okay, we all know this is true. The rationalization and cognitive dissonance, and the minute somebody does something wrong, the Gemara says, it becomes like it's okay. This is what our brain has, this beautiful ability, this wonderful tool called the brain, has this beautiful idea to say, I killed somebody, but it's okay. Like, deserved it, and so what happens, what the real process is there. By the way, it doesn't have to be killing somebody, hating somebody also, like it's so rationalized. It's so justified how we could hate people. And if you, one of our authors of Mosaic Press, Shia Hecht, Rabbi Shia Hecht, he taught me that like every abuser blames the victim. Not that the victim feels it is there. That every abuser in court, they'll get up. I did it for this person. They tempted me to do this. It's crazy how the brain works. So what happens is, first there's this horrible chet where all your ruchnius like sort of seeps out of your body, and then your brain becomes crooked. You become krum. This happens to everybody on a small level. But if you're really bad, it happens on a big level. So we went from, follow me here, we went from Harban to Sreifa, because the Moach is already a tool. It's not the existential, it's not the essence of the person. It's a tool. And the tool, because of the lack of the spiritual blood flow to this brain, like that's how it works, blood goes to the brain. So because of the lack of spiritual flow to the brain starts becoming stupid and starts to say things which make no sense. Has anybody witnessed this? It's just like unbelievable. Intelligent people. By the way, I'm not talking like Fromm, not Fromm, everybody. Like intelligent people, after they do something wrong, they say the stupidest things. That's the way it is. So this is going from Harban to Sreifa. Well, V'acher kach b'moach. Let me just skip the parentheses for a moment. V'hu nisraf legamri. You become nisraf, like my chitzonius. So it went from the pneumius to the chitzonius. V'hu nisraf legamri. She'enenu makom mechil av leprokim machsheva shem shemayim she'ula yavai hira tshuva l'leiv. I'm in a place where I'm thinking so wrongly that you can try to appeal to a person to do tshuva, but it's not going to work because my brain is not working correctly. And the third thing that happens to me is a varei hamaisa goylim l'makam tuma. I start doing more bad things. That's called Golos Ha'Ivarim in all the Svarim. So Golos Ha'Ivarim, so it's just fascinating. A person does a chet, and the next thing you know, I start thinking crooked, and then the next thing you know, I start doing more chatoim, which is probably the essence of Avera Gereris Avera. This is the process, this is how it works. You find similarly that the Gemara says that Hu Yetzer Hara, Hu Asatan, Hu Malach HaMavos. So there's these three characters that appear all the time. Yetzer Hara, the Satan is a different thing, and the Malach HaMavos is another thing. Like whatever they are, they're three different things. So the Gemara, no, it's all the same thing. But Elabai, I heard this from Rav Hutner. Something starts off as a Yetzer Hara. And then, maybe I want to do this, maybe I could do it, maybe I should steal the money, maybe I should say this, so I have this Yetzer Hara, and then I do it. I succumb to the Yetzer Hara, and now, Hu Yetzer Hara, Hu HaSatan. And the Satan, the pshat in the Satan is, the Satan is something which is, like what it really means is it's like hu yastinenu vasigar b'Satan leval yastinenu. We said that before, most of right. That what it means is the Satan is like the advocate of Ra, pushing Ra, Malach HaMavos until it kills you. So it in itself is a sequence of Yetzer Hara, Satan, and Malach HaMavos. It's the same sequence as the Chorban Beis HaMikdash, which is Chorban Sreifa Golus. So what we have new here is a three-step process to dying, spiritually, physically, and the Beis HaMikdash. Let's remember the Gemara. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, at the beginning of each one of these steps, there's an oy, words of the Gemara, words of the Tan. Oy, Hashem says oy. What's the oy? Oy is they went from step A to step B to step C. Hechrafti is Basi. I had to walk out of this by. I couldn't be in there. I had to walk out of the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Sarafti is Heichali. The building gets burned down. There's no more Beis HaMikdash. Iglesias Banai Oy, and Oy. Three Oys. That's what Rav spoke out, that these were the three Oys of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Then Rabbi Yossi, Gemara tells us, then Rabbi Yossi walks into Achas Mechorvos Yerushalayim. Maybe the Gemara wants to be hidden, so we'll keep it hidden. But he walks into the Achas Mechorvos Yerushalayim, and he hears the Oy, Oy, Oy. That's what he hears. I got in the I was quoting before the Chidushei HaGoinim. It's a collection of the Goinim and the Yaacov. And he speaks about the fact that, just to make it a little bit more exciting, what was going on over here, that Rabbi Yossi was at the door after Rabbi Akiva, and he says that they really thought in that generation that Bar Kochba was the Mashiach. They really thought, okay, we had a Geulah, so it was a terrible thing. The Romans came in, they destroyed the Beis HaMikdash, destroyed the son of everything, terrible, terrible, terrible. Higi Azman for the Beis HaMikdash. And Rabbi Yossi traveled to Yerushalayim at that time, this is what he says, and he came into the Beis HaMikdash, and he started to daven like that. Why Eliyahu Navi says, like, what are you doing? There's a Chorban Beis HaMikdash. What are you doing in the Makom HaMikdash? So the answer is, he said, Golos, Golos, I can't be. You can't expect us to be Torah Jews. In Golos, Yafsiku be Ovrei Drachim. Every time we turn around, we build something. We build a yeshiva, they destroy it. We create a renaissance of Torah, it gets destroyed. Like Golos, Yafsiku be Ovrei Drachim. We need to be here in Yerushalayim, in this makom, in order to do it. So what was he? Eliyahu Hanavi's Gevaldige Kasha and Rabbi Yossi's even more Gevaldige answer. I want to jumpstart the Geulah. So Rabbi Tzaddik in a minute brings down this Gemara that says, which I'll get to in a second, Aber Rabachi, so Aber Rabbi Yaacov. So he said, Meres, Shebeis Abiktosh Osili Bonais. I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong thing. That Eila Kadosh Baruch Hu Nichnas Lemala Ad Nichnasim Lamata. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not begin the process of Geulah until we first go in. So what was going on over here is that Rabbi Yossi, possibly, is that Rabbi Yossi had like this idea. He was a Gadol Hador. Rabbi Yossi had this idea of let's go and kind of jumpstart the Geulah. And Eliyahu Hanavi, who's the one who's Mavaser the Geulah, said, what are you doing there in the Beis Hamikdash? Had to be in the Beis Hamikdash. Again, I'm not making any political, but it's just fascinating here. Misyari hayisi shema yafsikuni oivrei drachim. Amrli, Eliyahu Hanavi says, Hayilach lispalo tefillah ksara. If you're in Galus, just don't get so kavua with your davening. Daven at tefillah ksara. That's all. Like this is Galus. The Gemara, Rabbi Yossi reported that I learned three things from Eliyahu Hanavi. Lamadati shei nichnasan l'chorva, you don't go in there. Lamadati shemispalim baderach, that even if you're baderach, which says here it means Galus, mispalel, you're allowed to be mispalel baderach. The lamadati, but I also learned shah mispalel baderach mispalel tefillah ksara. Just daven a short tefillah. I want to, before we get to the second paragraph here, I just want to point out something in the Shemoneh Esrei. So I was thinking about this morning. In Shemoneh Esrei, which the more we dive on Kavanah, the better it is. It's interesting, we're talking about on Shabbos, the Reform movement, and one of their favorite Gemaras is HaMispalel Baderach Yispalel Tefillah Ksara. If you look at the Chuvas, this is what they quote over and over again. I guess, this arichas of saying Shtila Shemoneh Esrei and Chazor Sashatz and all it, just cut down to the chase and talk more about that on Shabbos. But anyways, in the Shemoneh Esrei is divided into a number of different sections. There's the Avos, of course. The Art Scroll has it divided. There's Kedusha, Bina, Tshuva, Slicha, but sort of Gashmias. And then comes what we call the Birchas HaGeulah, the tefillas for the Geulah. The tefillas for the Geulah start with Tekah b'shofar gadol l'cheruseinu v'saneis l'kabetz gadol yaseinu. And the Sfarim learn a lot from the order of the Shemoneh Esrei. So you have Tekah b'shofar, Hashiva shofteinu k'varishenu. Let's reset up a Sanhedrin. Allah tzadikim alachazim liYerushalayim ircha berachmim tashuv. Let the Shechina come back into Yerushalayim as Semach David Abdecha Meheres Hatzmiach, and let Mashiach come. So these are the tefillas that we are davening in the Shemoneh Esrei. There should be. Let's look at the order for a second. There should be Kibbutz Golios. Hashem, Kibbutz Golios. People come back to Eretz Yisrael. Hashiva Shoftenu K'Verishonu V'Yoatzeinu K'Vatchila. What this means on a deep level, which is all the Sfarim say, is all it means there should be a Sanhedrin again. But once there's Kibbutz Golios, meaning you have to have Rav Yisrael al Ad Masam L'Chayr. So now we could start a Geulah process. So what's the Geulah process? Starts Hashiva Shoftenu K'Verishonu. Says the Gra and his sitter that what also this means is we should have back, there's Sheftei Gerishona, Yoatzeduk Vatchila, there should be the kind of Chachamim and Nevi'im that can tell people why you were created, what's your function in this world. So there's this major kibbutz golius, and then the question everybody always has, okay, now what am I supposed to do here? What's my part in the school? It's not like sort of what job I'm supposed to have, but like what's my personal contributions to make. So this is where, once there's kibbutz golius, there are these gedolim that are going to be miyais, whether in the form of a Sanhedrin or in the form of Nevi'im. It doesn't really make that much of a difference. Ala tzadikim, ala chasidim, al ziknei amcha beis Yisrael. Tzadikim. And then liYerushalayim ircha barachmim tashuv. Who comes back? The Shechina. Meaning, we come back, kibbutz golius, and then we daven. The next step will be liYerushalayim ircha Barachmim Tashuv, you will come back, your Shechina will return to Yerushalayim. V'sishkain b'seicha. Kasher debarta. There should be a Shechina there. Sishkain means Shechina. Uvnei oisa b'kar b'yameinu binyan oilam. Then finally, Mashiach. Es semach tav avdecha, meheres hatzmiach, v'kar nitar mishuasecha. We have the kind of malchus, which is with no corruption, which the whole world respects. There's a Mashiach that's here. Interesting that we talk about it, we're always like, we go right for the jugular. When we say Mashiach shall come, like we're going right to the Semech David Avdecha, but there's steps here of Kibbutz Golius and Sanhedrin. There's steps, like the Rambam enumerates in Hilchos Malachim, the different steps of the Geulah. Question. What did I skip?
Sorry, it's a universal thing that everyone holds the steps, the way it's expressed in Shemona.
What are you saying?
Is it a universal thing that everyone holds the steps, the way it's expressed in Shemona?
I mean, does anybody argue?
Yeah, I think.
No. It's Anshe Knesset Geulah. What's curious to me is, we all know the Gemara, that when they were going over, when they were going over Shimon HaPakuli al Yemasader in Yavna, they were going over the Shemona Esrei. Here's the Shemona Esrei Sidurim. So they were going over, what did the Anshe Knesset Geulah way back? Yavna was at the end, and Anshe Knesset Geulah was the time of Ezra. So when they were masakim, what were the Shemona Esrei brachas? And they reviewed it together as Yavna, as they should do. The Beis Gadol of Yavna should do. Sanhedrin should be Yavna. And they reinstituted the Shemona Esrei in a way that everybody should know about it. This was, by the way, right after the Chorban, right? Yavna, Tein li Yavna v'chachamel. That was right after the Chorban Bayis Sheni. Come Shimon HaPakuli, he says, what's up here? We're missing Birchas Haminim. Where's the Birchas Haminim? Doesn't anybody know how to make the Birchas Haminim? Like, in other words, they saw there's something missing in the Shemona Esrei. It was like interesting. And there was no Birchas Haminim, apparently, in the time of the Anshe Knesset Geulah. Or maybe there wasn't, they forgot it, but they already had Shemona Esrei. That's the 19th bracha. So they knew 13th. But what about Birchas Haminim? Here's the Romans. The Christian influence was growing and growing and growing at that time. And there's all kinds of Lamalshinim and Kolarisha, V'cholayvecha, V'azedim, Meir Sakir, Shaber, Smagir. What about the Birchas Haminim? So Shmuel HaKatan, the Gemara says, stands up. And he says, I can compose the Birchas Haminim, and he composes this prayer of Lamalshinim al Ti Sikva. Why Shmuel HaKatan? Like, in other words, like, what are we going to daven that the Rishoyim should all drop dead? That's the question that they asked. Shimon HaPakuli. And Shmuel, doesn't anybody know how to be Masakin that tefillah? What's so hard? That's one of our favorite tefillah. What's so hard to daven? But the answer is that if it's going into Shemona Esrei, it has to be 100% L'Shem Shemayim. It has to be really for Kvod Hashem. So who's the one who's going to daven for the Rishoyim to all drop dead and be 100% L'Shem Shemayim? Only Shmuel HaKatan, because he's the one who said in Pirkei Avos, "Bin fola yivcha al tismach," and he was 100% l'shem shemayim. That there's no simcha and Rishoyim leaving this world. It's a sad thing. It's anyways curious because that mission is Shmuel HaKatan noimer bin fola yivcha al tismach. This is the pasuk. What did he say? So the answer is, it wasn't what he said. He was. He was, Shmuel HaKatan was the bin vola yivchal tisvach. He had no hana from the fact. So somebody who has for the fact that the Rishonim are going to drop, but that's a seder of what's going on over here. So he was the one to be misakin. My question. Okay, there has to be a birchas haminim, so put it at the end. Isn't that a more logical place? What are you putting it in the middle, or put it by the part about tshuva, or put it by simshalom? Like, why is it in the middle of the Geulah? Like b'diyuk between takab b'shofar gadol chereseinu v'liyerushalayim yerchav v'rachamim tashuv v'lamal shinim al tisikva. Why? Why is it there? They're in the way. And by the way, I can't find this in a sefer. I'm just telling you what I think and what Chaim thinks. That the pshat is that as you approach the Geulah, you run into, as you approach the Geulah, there's kibbutz galuyos. Look what's happening here. It's Gewalt. There's kibbutz galuyos. Everybody's coming. The Shekhinah is about to come in over there. We're outside. We want to get in. What happens? The malshinim are in the way, and we're banging our nose on the Rishonim that are not letting us in spiritually, figuratively, or actually into the Makom HaMikdash. Not only that, they're not letting the Shekhinah in. In other words, when he said he got to this point of the Geulah, he says, but what about the minim? What about the apokarsa? What are we going to do about them? We're stuck here. So comes Shmuel HaKatan, he's masakin the bracha, and that's where they put it. So the Malshinim al Tisikva becomes a part of the Seder HaGeulah. That's what happened there in Yavne. Now, it's fascinating because if you look in the Svarim, I mentioned this before, that the Arizal tells us that V'hazei de mehera sa'aker shaber usmager. It's three things. These three things, v'sachniya. These three things in Kabbalah are called the sholosh klipas hatmeis, meaning that the Beis Hamikdash, sholosh klipas hatmeis, the Beis Hamikdash is a hard nut to crack. It's surrounded by klipa, because every protected thing is surrounded by klipa. Look at Eliyahu Navi. What are you doing in there? It's not safe. That's one klipa. It's not right. That's another klipa. You know, there are so many klipas which stop us from. Am I saying right or not? That stop us from building the Beis Hamikdash today. Shalosh klipas hatvei. So is it Muslims? Is it Jews? What's that? Is it our Averas? Shalosh klipas hatvei. So we got to daven. Says Yossi Shimon Apakuli. We have to daven for a breakthrough in the Sholosh Klipas Hatmeis in order to get through. So Rabbi Yossi, the Tzaddik, the Gadol Hador, he broke through, and he's trying to do it from the back. Let's go from the back forward. That's the next paragraph in the Rav Tzaddik, which we'll have to do next week. So he's making this huge breakthrough, and he says we cannot. What's he saying to Eliyahu Navi? We can no longer stand the yafsiku b'oivre drochim. It's not something that Klal Yisrael can take any longer. Again, Rabbi Yossi, right after Rabbi Akiva was very young during the time of the Chorban, Rabbi Yossi was his Talmud. So, must speak.
He hears the third Mishnah, no?
And he hears the third Mishnah.
I think so. He heard the Mishnah and it happened.
Yeah, and this is beautiful what you're saying, and this is what Eliyahu Navi pointed out. Did you hear something when you were there? Shabbat Mashu. He says, yeah. He says, so every day this is going on. Eliyahu Navi, this is a Gilui Eliyahu, that you're always, that this is a voice that Hashem is always roaring. This is a line that's always roaring. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Shmuel, Amar Rav. And you're not going to hear it. You heard a baskol, and what you heard is the emes. That's what you heard. Tachlis lamadti. I learned from Eliyahu Navi. I wasn't supposed to do that. There's a historical sequence, but this is so let's just sum it up in two sentences. What do we learn today? Because there's a lot here, and this is the first half of this Chavtas. Number one is that the lashon. These are three different steps in the Golus, And what we're learning is there's going to be also 3 different steps going back into the Geulah. And what's happening over here with these 3 different steps is that there first becomes an abandonment, a void of the Shekhinah itself in the Makam HaMikdash. That's what Chorban Hechrafti is basically. Memela, like the Neshama leaves the Guf, Memela Sarafti is Heicholi. Memela Iglesias Manai Lebeinu Masoilam comes Golas. Rabbi Yossi, the next Gemara, is trying to get back in. All of Klal Yisrael is trying to get in. And this is your sequence of Shemona Esrei. The sequence of Shemona Esrei is exactly this. Let's get Kibbutz Golius. Let's get the crowds here. Let's break through the Klippa. And let's get back inside. And I'm sorry. And Asemach David Abducha Meheres Hatzmiach. Let there be Mashiach, and let this whole thing work again. So, like we got out, we want to go get back in. And this is true to summarize also on a personal level with a chote. Says Reb Tzaddik, that a chote first loses the Shekhinah when he does a chet. The next thing is, the more chitzoni thing, the moach starts to go. This is the cognitive dissonance that we're talking about. And the third thing is, Golos Hayvar, I start acting like an idiot. So it's leiv, boach, baisim, Golos Hayvar, all the same process. And our next step is, how do you do tshuva? How do you get back in? How do you get back into the Geulah? Thank you.